Welcome to the Charleston County Transportation Sales Tax Program. Some folks call it Roadwise, but it's both. It's been around for a long time, as you know, and I'm going to be talking with a gentleman who is involved in utilities. You know, that's a part of it. That's a big part of building a road. You've got to make sure that the utilities that are underground and overhead are treated in such a way as we don't interfere with the services that are being provided by the community. And I'm talking about utilities like South Carolina Electric and Gas, or whomever else you can imagine, the water companies, etc. And we have one civil engineer who's responsible for all of this. He gets these people together and he gets them to agree on certain things, and we're going to find out what his secrets are all about as it regards putting together all of these utilities people. His name is James Wilson, and he is with Michael Baker. And Michael Baker is a management company from Pittsburgh that is responsible for working with Charleston County in all of its transportation sales tax programs and all of the work that's being done under the transportation sales tax program. So it's good to have you here today.
Pleasure to be with you.
You're a hard-working young man, I understand.
Yes, ma'am.
James, how long have you been in this field of work?
As far as the utilities go, just a little over 3 years. I've been in civil engineering, though, for approximately 7 years now. So
yeah, we have a program here at Roadwise where we are introducing young people to the field of engineering as a career. And I sure would love to have you sometimes go out with us to the high schools.
Yes, ma'am, I'd love to.
That's a great field, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am,
and it
is.
does well. And you've been with Michael Baker, and then before that it was LPA for, again, how long?
Just over 3.5 years. It'll be 4 years this coming March.
But you've been in this field for quite a long time.
Yes, ma'am. I worked for another local engineering firm over in Mount Pleasant.
Now,
prior to
a civil
Baker.
engineer can do many things, so I assume this is your specialty.
Well, as a civil engineer, you kind of like to say that we really don't have a specialty. You can do anything from working with, utility design and relocation, roadway design. I did site development, so I did designs for subdivisions and commercial projects, and you can do things like that all the way to big things like the Cooper River Bridge.
Wow.
So lots of civil engineers worked on that. So
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
a wide range of different things that you can do with the civil engineering.
I think the purpose of the program today and asking you here is to help the public understand that it takes a while before we can even start with a project. And there are all of these things, I'll call it behind the scenes,
Yes,
that
ma'am.
occur. And this is one of them. Getting those underground, especially underground, sometimes on poles, but getting all of those kinds of utilities in line, get all of the people responsible for it in agreement. Now, does that mean that you literally get with people who are representing the very utilities, and do you all talk over what's underground and the design of the road, and the road may go into this area and your lines are in that area? I mean, how do you work these things out?
Really, that's how we start. We get data from the surveyors that go out and pick up all the existing features of the area that we plan on doing a project in, and that's everything from the existing road to buildings and whatever existing utility features they can find, and then depending on the size of the project, we'll also do what they call subsurface engineering. And basically, a group of engineers and technicians go out with a big radar on wheels, more or less, and pick up all the everything that's underground, water and sewer lines, telephone lines that may be underground. And once we have all that data collected, the design engineers will go through and design the road to whatever standards are required by DOT or the county. And then once we get to a preliminary design, that's usually the first time I get a look at it as far as utilities go. And I go through that preliminary design and look at where the existing utilities are and where the proposed road improvements are going to go, to see if there's any conflicts with sidewalk, curb and gutter, drainage pipelines that are going to be installed underground.
You know, we say to the public all the time, at least we do, those of us who are responsible for the public information and getting knowledge out to the public about what we're doing. We say all the time that it's going to take time, sometimes a couple of years to get a project done. What would be the time that utilities people like you or engineer like you would come into play? Is it during the design phase? Is it later on? Is it during the building phase? Where do you fit into this whole process?
Actually, I fit in all those phases. You know, the design phase is probably the most important time when I fit in. That's the time where we can resolve a lot of things on paper, and maybe we change something in the road design to lessen a utility impact. And like we always like to say, you know, it may cost another few $100s to have the engineer change it on paper, but that's better than a few thousand to get something fixed in the field that could have been resolved earlier.
Does everybody generally, everybody meaning the various utilities companies and their representatives, do they normally go along with what you're trying to propose as to the best way of handling it? And if not, what are some of the problems that come up?
Usually the biggest problem with the roadway improvements that come up with the utility owners, a lot of it just runs into, it becomes the amount of facilities that they have to, that we are asking them to relocate and how long that can actually take them. You know, a perfect example is seg1 transmission power lines, the ones on the big steel poles. Those can, you know, just moving 5 or 6 of those can take SCNG 6 to 8 months.
Wow.
So a lot of times it becomes trying to balance how much we're asking them to move with the amount of time it would take them to move those facilities.
What I'm seeing, or the picture that you're painting in my mind, is that they're literally miles, well, feet, but certainly in some cases miles of underground lines, et cetera, that have to be dealt with by these companies. Is that the case? Is it that big?
On some projects it can be that big. Johnny Dodds or the Bees Ferry Road Widening Project are perfect examples. You know, Bees Ferry Road project is from US 17 to Highway 61. So there's, you know, about 5 miles of roadway, and there's underground utilities from one end to the other that have to be dealt with and either moved, or, you know, design of the roadway had to be adjusted a little bit to avoid them. So
now, was all of this considered? All of these lines having to be moved, and did you get with the utilities companies before the work actually started? And maybe there was a change. Maybe someone said, maybe we ought not take this route because it's going to be too expensive, it's going to take too long for the utilities company. We got to get this project out by a certain time, by spring or summer. Do you ever run into that and say, hey, stop, we can't do this one?
While I've been here, we haven't run across one where utilities has made it cost prohibitive to do the project, but there have been projects where we've had to go back and look at redesigning sections of improvements to try and reduce the impacts on the utility owner, just because, you know, they were telling us to move this amount of facilities. You know, we're looking at least a year, maybe longer, just because of the quantity that was involved with what they had to move.
So you have to wait on them?
We either have to wait on them or see if there's something we can do in the roadway design to reduce that impact and maybe even eliminate that conflict so that issue goes away.
When we come back from the break, I'm going to be asking James about changing the route entirely of a new road or a refurbished road when this kind of problem comes up. that there's just too much underground and we can't go that way. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Please don't go away.
Hey, Charleston County, let's recycle. Charleston County makes it easy. Recycling glass, aluminum cans, steel and aerosol cans, plastics 1 to 7. We recycle them all. And don't forget paper. If it tears, recycle it. Even cardboard. Recycle at work, at home, and at play. So whether you're using the 2 curbside bin system and separating or the all-in-one roll cart system, keep recycling. Brought to you by Charleston County Environmental Management.
Welcome back to our transportation sales tax program. I'm talking with James Wilson, who is a civil engineer for Michael Baker, and Michael Baker is an organization that is responsible for managing the transportation sales tax program. Many of their engineers are involved in this program, and it makes it pretty, well, not so easy, but it makes it professional, and the county has someone that they can depend on who knows what they're doing, because you've got all of these engineers trained and ready to go. So it's good to have a management company. Also wanted to mention before we start talking with James about the underground utilities and above ground utilities that are involved in a project like this is the fact that the county of Charleston, if you recall, back around 2004, went to the public and asked us through the various sales entities, businesses and the like, to pay a half penny, so that we could raise money to do all of this work. I think some $25 billion is involved, and so many number of years, 25 years or something like that.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's the program, and a half penny is feeding this program, and it's making it work. And there have been a huge number of projects that have been completed over the last almost 10 years. And the program is still going on, and that's exciting as far as I'm concerned. We were talking about utilities before we went to the break, underground wiring and piping and all of those things that carry or conduct into our homes and into businesses and provide services to us. Is there a time when you have to say to these utility companies that you're meeting with, listen, we can't go that route. It's too costly, too much is involved, or has the project already started and there's no looking back?
Usually, if a project's started, we've, at least come up with a plan of how to deal with any utility conflicts. There's always going to be something that comes up in the field during construction. There's a utility line that somebody didn't know was in that specific location. Maybe they thought it was 10 feet the other way, and it turned out it was a little closer to where we may be digging to lay drainage line. But the utility owners and us and the construction company usually get together and get that resolved in pretty short order. But there are some projects that depending on the amount of utilities that are there have the potential to be scaled back just because the cost involved with utilities becomes prohibitive for doing the project.
Now, is all of this that you just mentioned, is all of this straightened out before the first digging of dirt and getting into the project? Or is it something that happens at the design phase? Where does all of this happen? Any changes like that?
We like to make it happen in the design phase. It's easier to make a change either to a utility location or something in the roadway design. It's easier to make that change before you've got a contractor out there trying to actually build the project and widen the road or whatever the project entails. So if we can make the change on paper in the design phase, that's always the time when we like to make that happen.
When the utilities people sit down with you, are they looking at the cost, or are they looking at the convenience? I mean, what is it that they consider important in taking up or leaving or cooperating with you or not cooperating with you? What is their big concern?
It's kind of a combination of all those. They're obviously looking at the cost. Some of the utility owners that we deal with, because of their nature, companies like AT&T, Comcast, and Nology, anytime they do a relocation on a project, it's money that they're putting out for that relocation, and they don't get directly reimbursed for that cost in the relocation. Entities like SCE&G, CWS, because of the nature of their utility, there are times where the cost for them to relocate a facility, the county will reimburse that cost.
I was going to ask that, and the county would be the owner of the project, or DOT.
Yes,
just
ma'am.
depends. So the owner then reimburses the utility company if they have to pay out.
Depending
Lots of money.
depending on the project, and if the utility owner has what is called prior rights, meaning that facility was there and they own an easement or a piece of property that they've purchased from property owners to put that facility where it's located. If they have a situation like that prior to the roadway improvements, and the roadway improvements encroach into that easement and require them to move that facility, then somebody like CWS or SCNG would be eligible for the county to reimburse them that relocation cost.
Could somebody's front yard be that easement?
It could be somebody's front yard. It could be the
or a portion of their front
or
yard,
yeah, a portion of
or
their front
driveway.
yard. Yes, ma'am. It could be a situation like that. Along roads that have a lot of commercial facilities. Johnny Dodd's Boulevard is a good example of that, where there's lots of commercial entities. It could be a portion of the property that a bank sits on, or a grocery store or something like that. So and typically that portion is directly adjacent to the existing road.
You don't run into problems with wetlands and that kind of thing, do you?
Depending on the project, we can. Bees Ferry Road widening has a lot of wetlands in several locations along that corridor, and there were areas where utilities were being relocated, and had the utility relocated beyond the new right-of-way for the road, they would have been in the wetlands and had all kinds of issues with moving that utility to that location. And if there's a situation like that, that's where we try to work with them, and maybe they have to move their facility, but not as far, and that facility the conflict is resolved, and maybe that facility is relocated to just inside of the new road right-of-way.
So there's no need in a case like that for mitigation of any kind?
No, ma'am. We try to, if we can avoid it, we try to keep from forcing the utility owners to, encroach into wetlands and things of that nature.
And sometimes you're dealing with government bodies, and they own the utilities, I would imagine. And you have to, work with them to make sure that they're satisfied, and
yes, ma'am. Yes,
you're
ma'am.
satisfied with it?
Absolutely. It's there's always some compromise in any of the projects. There's been several times where I've gone back to talk to a design engineer and ask him, can we move this drainage line, 5 feet this way or 5 feet this way to avoid a large water line that would cost millions and millions of dollars to move.
When the